Tensions are rising in Delta State over the delineation of electoral wards, a development that has sparked conflict between the Ishekiri and Ijaw communities. The controversy is rooted in claims of marginalization and fears of political exclusion, with accusations that the delineation favors one ethnic group over another. Meanwhile, the political crisis in neighboring Rivers State continues to escalate, creating a ripple effect across the South-South region. With rising ethnic tension and political instability, the situation is fast becoming a test of leadership, federal oversight, and the country's fragile unity. Well, joining us now is Jonathan Lokpobiri, president of the Ijaw Youth Council. He will speak to the unfolding crisis in Delta State over ward delineation and the growing unrest between the Ishekiri and Ijaw people. He will also weigh in on the Rivers State political standoff and how it affects the larger Niger Delta region. Well, thank you so much for joining us on Newsday.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we can see that there's a bit of controversy over the issue of the delineation of wards. What are your thoughts on this? How has the Supreme Court's order for fresh delineation exercises in this area, how has it been received by the Ijaw community?
First, the Ijaw nation took the bold step in approaching the court to define how their population is being determined. And it took a tortuous legal journey that eventually got a judgment from the Supreme Court since 2022, December precisely. And INEC only obeyed the Supreme Court's directive or order to conduct a fresh delineation of the wards within the federal constituency. Remember, from time immemorial, these three local governments that make the federal constituency have only produced an Ishekiri man like a permanent seat in the Federal House of Representatives. And remember, in 2007, when former INEC chairman Maurice Iwu was in charge, he acknowledged this anomaly and stated clearly that the Warri federal constituency, wherein these three local governments, Warri South, Warri Southwest, and Warri North local governments, the data about the population is completely false. So it was premised on the INEC chairman's position that the Ijaw people, instead of taking laws into their hands, approached the court, which for me is the way any organized society must go. They lost at the first court, they went on appeal, and then eventually the Supreme Court validated their concern and ordered a fresh delineation exercise where everybody, because for us as Ijaw people, it's not rocket science. If you say you have population, the human beings are there to be counted. So for me, it's an aberration that an exercise that is conducted to verify the veracity of the claim in the population we have there is creating ethnic tension. It is unnecessary. And as far as we are concerned, we want to know if the Ishekiris are more in their number. Of course, they are our brothers. They've been living like that over the years. If our people are more, which we believe that we have an overriding population over the rest of our brothers living in that system, there's nothing to be worried about. So we wanted a proper recounting of the population in these communities. And to be quite honest, INEC, in obedience to the court order, had gone ahead, not in isolation, in collaboration with the three ethnic groups. Remember, the Ijaws, the Ishekiris, and the Urhobos are major tribes within Warri, and especially within these three local governments. More of the Ijaws, Urhobos, and Ishekiris make up this federal constituency. So this is what has happened. So creating ethnic tension around this is unnecessary. As far as we are concerned, the INEC is an independent body which cannot be intimidated or cowed into giving or allocating numbers to people that do not exist. What is being corrected here is to create the existing human beings that make up this federal constituency.
And you're right, it is causing ethnic tension in a state that already has quite a bit of issues going on in terms of the tension that is surrounding the polity. What steps can be taken to mitigate some of the consequences of this Ijaw and Ishekiri bad blood that seems to be brewing? It's actually being called an Ijaw dominance agenda. What can be done to douse the rhetoric and the tensions?
First, let me correct this wrong notion. There's nothing like dominance. When you are more populated in a society where you have an overriding population over the rest of the people, it automatically creates that dominance, because population is what determines who gets what in democracy. Now, in this constituency, the only thing the Supreme Court has done was to correct a false thing that existed over the past decades. Now, for the Ijaws, what we want is a transparent process where the human beings who make up this constituency are the ones that determine who gets what. Now, raising the issues of Ijaw people dominating them is wrong. The reason is like the operations within that axis. We have hardly had the difference between Ijaws, the Shekiris, and the Urhobos. For the wrong insinuations people are having that, oh, the Ijaw people, the Baramatu people are creating such kind of domineering, it doesn't exist. The business in their hand involves everybody. So if in a political issue that we want clarity done, and then people didn't take the laws into their hands, they approached the court, went through the entire legal process till Supreme Court gave judgment 2 years ago. The only thing you are seeing that is creating the tension is because people no longer have confidence in their number. The population they claim they have that have been dominating the rest of the people over the years. Now, people want to be recounted transparently, so we can ascertain who has what in the federal constituency. This is what has happened. So my appeal to our Ishekiri brothers is that if we must learn from history, in 1996, an Ijaw local government was created, which is Warri Southwest. This local government was created purely an Ijaw enclave. But somehow, I must say that our brothers, the Shekiris, have always had this privilege of access to power, resources, and all of that. So somehow, people manipulated that process, and then they forced themselves to be part of that, especially the Warri North. And eventually, they are now part of the Warri North local government. That created some of the skirmishes. Now, over Warri South local government that was created for an Ijaw community, they found themselves, and then the headquarters from Ogbejo was shifted to Ogidigbe. If you were in anybody's shoes, would you not see the brazen manipulation of truth? That was what, even that everybody who lived in Warri knew that the Warri was a center of commerce within the Niger Delta, the oil and gas city. That 1996 crisis is the gain of Lagos today, because every businesses, the oil and gas industry that had dominated everybody fled to Lagos. And up till this minute, Warri hasn't recovered from that sad story. So for people who are grown enough to understand what history teaches us, and still creating the same tension that will precipitate violence amongst us, must be cautioned.
No, but Mr. Lokpobiri, seeing as there seemed to be a lack of trust in INEC in some quarters, Are you worried about electoral manipulation or fraud in the affected areas, and how can these concerns be addressed?
If you are concerned about the integrity of the umpire, it is something that you can approach the court or more people to be democratically involved in that process so that transparency is made public. But creating the issue of Ishekiri raising war songs against the job people, and as if any of us is immune to such is avoidable. And this is the reason why we are coming timely, that the job people, what they want simply is a transparent process, which hitherto had involved both Ishekiri's, Urobos, and the Jos, where focal points, persons have been involved in this process with the INEC. Truth is always truth. No matter how much you bury truth, it will always come out. And what has come out is the truth, which people are not comfortable with. Our appeal is follow through the process. Even if you are not comfortable with the job people, at least the INEC, you cannot avoid it, because INEC will still conduct the elections over you. So the important thing is follow through the process, raise your questions in the process. And once the process is transparent enough, and the final report, just as they've given preliminary reports as to which local government or which ethnic group has the number of wards that exists within these 3 local governments. This is what has happened. As far as we are concerned, it's quite profound that this truth was buried for decades, and today it's coming out. And what we simply want is, if you have the numbers, show them through head count.
Fair enough.
Thank you.
Fair enough. I want to pivot just a little bit to talk about the sole administrator. Since the declaration of the state of emergency, the appointment of the interim administrator, what have been your own observations concerning his performance thus far, the impact he has had on any political instability or stability, and what steps could he take in order to douse some of the tension and ensure more of a smooth transition of power for a democratically elected government?
Well, like I'd cried over this before, but it's a spilled milk already. So no matter how much we cry about the anomaly, the wrong that was done, it can be corrected. But now, to inform the world of what this man purportedly brought in to create the atmosphere for peace, dialogue, and stability in Rivers State is completely doing the direct opposite. Why do I say he's doing the direct opposite? As a sole administrator, what we had expected, as directed by the president during the proclamation, his sole duty was to restore public confidence in his intervention and to see how people who were once a political family but could no longer sit together over defining differences. Now, his intervention, if he was honest in his assumption of duties to restore peace, he would have treated both sides at least with some level or some measure of acceptance. We expected him to reach out to both parties. But you know what he did? He came with a clear mission to capture the state for whatever purpose. Now, he didn't just sack politicians, which was okay to enable him be able to restart a process or rejig the system. But he has gone further to even dissolve institutions of the state, which have statutory boards, which has nothing to do with his administration as a sole administrator. I do think that Mr. Ibok Ete has forgotten that he's a sole administrator. He assumes the dimension of an executive governor of Rivers State. Now, he has gone ahead to practically install, in fact, dismantle every structures that were set up by democratically elected governor and has set up his own fresh structures. Remember, RISEC, the River State Independent Electoral Commission, was set to conduct elections August, September. But the Supreme Court said that they have no such power because most of those things were done when there was no existing assembly to ratify their nominations and all of that, which was in the wisdom of the Supreme Court, we had no problem with. But the resources of River State, the government of our nation refused to release it to the governor of the state to conduct the business of governance because there was no existing legislature, which was considered an aberration. But today, the sole administrator, monies were released to him the day he was sworn in. Meanwhile, Governor Sim left over 240 billion in the coffers of River State. The whole of that money, from information available to us, has been released to him. The simple question is, in the Nigerian context, we know what power does with money. How can we guarantee the judicious use of that money that is not going into the hands of politicians and that will go into project? In any case, if for any reason money is released to him, under what appropriation bill is this money released to him? Remember, the governor didn't have access because there was no assembly to approve his budget. Who is now approving the budget for Ibokite? Also, he has gone ahead to practically dismantle every structure that has link to Governor Sim and erecting his own structures. Now, local government chairman that Supreme Court frowned that there should be no sole administrator because it's alien to our system. Now he has gone ahead to announce and inaugurated 23 local government as sole administrator like himself, all in a bid to emasculate the wills of the people. And I'm wondering what kind of peace under this kind of an administrator can we even anticipate?
But just as you said earlier, that there's no use crying over spilled milk. He has already taken all these actions. But I'm just wondering, what criteria do you think were used to select this new appointees, this new administrators for the local government? And how do you think these changes that have been made will affect service delivery and accountability in River State?
To be quite candid, my goal in this whole conflict has been the solution to the issues that have defined this wrong path that our leaders have taken. I'm not interested in the media outcries or the media attacks and all of that, because none of that will produce the solution we seek, because my method must be consistent with the goal I seek now, which is reconciliation. Now, for those who are involved, who are the defining characters in this conflict, our message to them is that if they consider the value of lives of the people of River State and by extension the Niger Delta region, they have all learned from experience here now that if they had approached this matter with a lot more humble attitude towards each other, this matter probably wouldn't have festered up till this moment. And now, when this declaration came in, the National Assembly, in their ratification of this process, clearly stated that they will provide an oversight function so that it doesn't become like a dictatorial process where the sole administrator has all the powers to decide whatever he wants, which is what is happening now. Now, part of the solutions to this is that I'm using this medium to call on the leadership of the National Assembly, the President of the Senate, the Speaker, Deputy President, and Speakers of the House of Representatives, that this man in River State does not mean well for the peace process that we all anticipate. And because we are concerned deeply daily, we want credible people constituted into a body under the federal government, involving Ijaw leaders and key stakeholders to start discussing the key issues, the underlying issues around this conflict. Otherwise, with the attitude we are seeing on the ground, this man will continue to grandstand the peace process, and after another 6 months, there will be no peace in sight, which will validate an extension of this declaration of state of emergency. And because I know that Nigeria is standing on the verge of another wrong experience, especially with regards to the threats and the happenings within the creeks of the Niger Delta, I can tell you for free that the signals are wrong. There are many signs within us, because what they perhaps wanted was Ijaw youths will carry arms and then confront the military in the streets of Port Harcourt. And at the end of the day, they kill as many as possible soldiers. Maybe some security personnel will also be victims, and then we become bitter and then hunt people like we've had before. We were wise this time. And that because the issues needed to be brought to the fore, the best way sometimes we deal with injustice is like to expose it like an ugly boil before the wall. And you shame it so people can learn from their experiences and the wrong emotions they have emitted into the air, creating this wrong behavior of people who are mature people but acting because of interest, acting as if even if River State or Niger Delta bonds is inconsequential. We cannot approach this conflict with such, because we will all regret tomorrow.